Similarly, in situations for sexual, anything that's sexual connotations, or in this case, sexual harassment or abuse, it comes with a huge risk because it is not easy to say no. Especially, like Justin said, like there is way too much that you're going to risk, whether being deported, losing your job, your contract being terminated, being left out on the street. There's just way too much risk in saying no that you compromise your safety, your sanity, just so that you're not losing out, not on the losing end. Did someone else also wanted to say something? I heard two names just now.
Yeah, I think Diana in the previous question, but in the chat box, she said that she wanted to elaborate on Akhil's point. So Diana, do you want to
Yes,
speak now or later?
I forgot what was the first perception.
Okay, this is the first one.
Okay, okay. The thing that I wanted to add on was that, sometimes how women's work is like, if let's say you do domesticated kind of work, so let's say like even your mothers and stuff, like they do partake in the work economy, the labor economy by like doing household chores and things like that. But then because this kind of hidden work isn't like, there isn't really like a price or like a wage that can be put into it. So it sort of like in the economy, they say that there's lower value because there's no price to it. But then we know that without this kind of work that's done by the women, then there's the possibility of the economy failing at the same time. So even though that there is the perception that it's easier or has lower value, but if you take the women's work away from the economy, then the economy cannot continue on. So there's still a very heavy importance in women's work lah.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. I think for a lot of times, a lot of these advantages, a lot of these important points are kind of just like pushed under the carpet because everybody views them in a very gender lens and perspective, which is why you have these kind of perceptions. And you're definitely right. If you take away these things, you take away these elements, our day-to-day routines get really disrupted to a point that a lot of things cannot function anymore. And I think a lot of times it also relates to how household work is seen, like it's something that a female is born to do. So which is why when you look at domestic work, it doesn't look like work, it just looks like an extension of your chores. I thought you put that really well. I really agree with what you said, and thank you for that. Thank you guys for all the statements. But is there anybody else who wants to add on to the sexually harassed abuse part before I go to the result of this perception? Okay, I go to the result of this perception. Okay, so the result of thinking that a woman migrant worker who doesn't say no, that it's partially her fault, right? The result of this is that there's an unbalanced power relationship between the worker themselves and the employer, that women can't even say no. So when you have an equal playing field, or there's some kind of balance in the relationship, then saying no doesn't come with so many dangers and inherent risks. Means that you are capable of saying no because it's infringing your safe space, it's getting into your personal space, and you're like, look, I'm not comfortable with this, I'm not going to do it. And the other party's like, okay, she said no, there's no consent, so that's it. But because of the inherent risk that comes with saying no when you're a female migrant worker, more often than not, the employers know that if you say no, this is going to happen. So obviously she's not going to say no. Okay? So women migrant workers are just here to find love, get into relationships, and start families. This feels like every American movie that wants a green card. Anyone? So much.
Yeah, Joshua, you can unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like it's a generalization, obviously, because many of them already have existing families, right? And I think they remit money back to support the families that they have at home. So this kind of like, this feels like a cheapening of very legitimate work, I think, that they are trying to do to support their families. I mean, we don't see expats as just trying to find love wherever they're working. So this is like, why would we view this any differently, I think?
So yes, that is true. Especially in Malaysia, I think you see it a lot, how we treat expats and how we treat migrant workers simply because they have a completely different income bracket. So expats usually earn more, usually do white collar jobs, and are treated with a lot more respect and dignity. Whereas migrant workers earn a lot lesser and do a lot of difficult jobs, the 3D, difficult, dangerous, and dirty, those kind of jobs, and they are kind of viewed more as, I don't know, I always feel like they're kind of viewed like just cattle, like there's just property in any event. And yeah, you're right. It does cheapen the work that they kind of do here, which is really important work. And the other thing about this is, if you look at this perception, right, that women migrants are just here to find love. So when you look at expats who are allowed to come in here, find anyone, fall in love, get married, it's all fine because you acknowledge that there are people, that they have these rights, to start families, to meet people, to get into relationships. But when you tell migrant workers, or you give this perception that they are here only to find love, or that they shouldn't be allowed to do so, it kind of also cuts off or removes their right to start families, to have private relationships and stuff like that. So the result of this kind of perception, it becomes very controlling. Employers feel that because they own the migrant workers, so they can control their movements and their behaviors. Then you also see it to the extent of stopping their employees from seeing other migrant workers within the community and holding their passports. Because they don't want to, they don't want to be in a predicament. Like you would see a lot of the statements by employers like, oh, if I give them the passport, if I let them go out, they're going to cause me more trouble. What if they get pregnant? What if they find a boyfriend? What do I do then? I have to pay a lot of money. I have to suffer the consequences. So with that in mind, where you treat them like property, you tend to also become a lot more controlling over the things that they do, because you think, I own you, I can say whatever I want, I can make sure that you don't cause me too much problems. So far, so good.
Can I also add something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's also worth mentioning that, like, actually to find love and to get married for a lot of these migrant workers, women migrant workers, is actually also difficult because legally it's not allowed. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So like if they wanted to get married here, they would have to like leave, get married outside, and then only come back because of the permit that they're on. Yeah. That's all.
So we will look at that later at the Minute Mania as well. But yes, essentially, if it's as simple as you're here on a student visa, you're not supposed to work. So if you're here on a work visa, you're not supposed to, well, do anything else other than work. So policies like this are also very controlling. But we'll look a little bit more on that later. I think there's another perception. Oh no, that's not. So there's generally poor perception that migrant workers take people's jobs, that their work doesn't really mean much, has low value. And what really these perceptions do, which I think you probably can see, is that there's a huge lack or gap in empowerment towards them in terms of them being able to make decisions for themselves, in terms of them being able to very strongly saying yes, no, to be able to have that freedom of choice when it comes to even the slightest things like what they want to do on their rest days, even if they're given rest days. Because there's all these perceptions that employers carry with them, even though that it's not really always the case. But because they have those perceptions, they act on it. And as a result, the victim to it all is the migrant worker. So these kind of perceptions are really dangerous because of what they result in, which is a lack of empowerment. And when you don't get to empower groups of people, when you take away their choices, they really do suffer quite a bit. So far, so good, guys. Wanna ask me something? Talk about it a bit more? Or shall I move on?
Any questions? All right, good. Yeah, we can move on.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to do the reality check, which is kind of fun. So we're going to play. I don't know if you know, if you're on Instagram most of the time, you would see that game called Choices. I think on TikTok as well, where you kind of like click what the person or the character has to do next, which usually on Instagram is, oh my God, I'm pregnant. What do I do now? So we're going to do something similar, and you're going to be Lisa, okay, a woman migrant worker, and you're going to make decisions as Lisa, and well, basically, we're going to be role playing. So it's kind of fun. I think it's fun. And also, by the way, this is actually a true story, but we're going to let you decide what Lisa does at every juncture. Okay, so you're a young mother of 2 from a small town in Indonesia, and your husband is not earning enough to support the family. One day, your friend tells you about Malaysia and that you can be a domestic worker there, and you think about it and you're like, you know what, I'm going to take it up. So your family won't help with traveling expenses because they think you're being irresponsible for a mom leaving your child behind. So how will you pay for it? Do you decide to sell off your jewelry, or do you want to ask your friend for a loan? Now remember, you're Lisa from Indonesia, so it's not the same kind of consequences you might face as yourself. So do you want to sell off your jewelry, which probably could be very little, or maybe it could be some sentimental gift from your mom? Or you want to ask your friend for a loan? Can you trust this friend? Is the friend going to charge you interest? Does your friend have enough? What do you do? And you have to consider, when you take a loan, you have to consider that you have to pay back the loan. So whatever money you earn in Malaysia right now is going to be divided between sending it to your family and paying the loan. Sounds very drastic, doesn't it?
Yeah. Think. Okay.
We'll
just
go with
no.
the answer. To make it easy, we'll go with the majority answer. We'll try to see here.
So of jewelry. Okay, but if you sell off your jewelry, right, will there be enough jewelry in the first place for you to actually like?
I technically don't know how much jewelry we're talking here, but let's just assume that it's enough for you to get to Malaysia.
Okay, but what if like the jewelry could be used by your family instead for their emergency money? Like you got to think about that, because you're thinking like you can't just think about yourself, right?
People are already calling you an irresponsible mom, so
Yeah.
Now Justin asked, why not both? Only choose one, Justin.
Well, Project Liberate doesn't allow me to click both, so unfortunately, you have to decide Lisa's fate at this point.
I think you can go with sell off jewelry. That's the one that seems quite popular.
Great. So now you can travel to Malaysia for work, and your friend says that she will take care of all the official documents. Such a nice friend. One day before your flight, your friend gets you to sign the contract for work, but it's in a language you don't understand. So what do? Do you ask for help? Or do you sign it because you trust your friend?
Ask for help.
Is
Alright.
that majority answer?
Yeah, most of you guys said ask for help. But okay, it's like before your last, it's like the day before your flight. Would you get any help at this point?
Considering your friend said that she'll take care of all the official documents, shouldn't the document be in the language you understand? Tiba-tiba it's in English.
Would you guys trust your friend?
Don't worry though, there's no wrong answer because these are a lot of decisions you make based on your circumstances. So don't worry.
She said the friend should have gotten her to sign it earlier then.
Yeah.
So what are we doing, guys? Are we asking for help, or are we going to sign because we trust our friend?
Ask for help.
Yeah.
Alamak, it was too late. So you could not get help translating the contract. So you signed the contract anyway, and now it's time to fly. So you arrive at Kuala Lumpur Airport. I have not seen in the last few years. with several other women migrant workers and you meet your agent for the very first time. You and several other migrant workers, you and several other migrant workers were brought to a house 2 hours away from the airport. Quite the journey. A few days later, okay, after you land, you take the van, and a few days later, you were sent to stay with your new boss. Okay, your employer's house was big and looked really, really nice. Now, your employer brought you in and directed you to a storeroom that was dusty and had a musty smell. She told you to clean it up as this will be where you would stay. So what do? You ask if you to stay somewhere else, because it's dusty and it smells really bad and, there's a lot of work in terms of cleaning it. Or do you keep quiet and make the best out of your home?
I keep quiet. Keep quiet. Oh. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Keep quiet.
So why do you guys want to keep quiet? I'm just curious. This is quite the consensus.
Yeah, a lot, like here it says that Sarah Zarina said that mainly because I don't want to risk things. Yeah, Irfan Naveen said that keep quiet because you don't know the employer fully yet.
Okay.
You just arrive.
Okay, nice.
Let's do that.
The employer asked for your passport, mentioned that they will also be cutting your first month's salary for work permit fee. So macam mana? What do? Do you ask why or do you give your passport?
Ask why. Okay, Justin said ask why. Akil said ask why. Wow.
But guys, why you guys were okay with keeping quiet in the previous scene, so how come this one you guys are fine
This
with
is my right.
questioning? Did you guys hear that? You heard that?
I think everyone's riled up like, hey, wait, you give me a terrible room and now you want my passport and my money? So what's majority saying?
Ask why.
Okay, so let's ask why.
Yeah, ask why.
Your employer says it's common practice and threaten to cut even more of your pay if you complain or ask any more questions. How now? So you begin work as a domestic worker, working from 5 a.m. to 12 a.m., 7 days a week. You slowly realize that this work is a lot more taxing than you thought with no proper working hours. Because even your 5 a.m. to 12 a.m. also is not fixed. And they can totally wake you up at like 3 in the morning and be like, hey, please do this. Then one day, right, you're folding clothes in the living room and your male employer walks in, comments on how tired you look and starts massaging your shoulders. And you find this really uncomfortable. But what do you do at that moment? Do you ask for help from your neighbor, or you keep your head low and continue working? Now remember, you asked why when you were asked to give your passport and your pay will be cut, and you saw what happened there. So what do you do now?
And who's to say the neighbor will help you? Because just think about this. Your employer has been around at that housing area a longer time and is probably friends with the neighbor. So, and you are somebody new and you're working for your employer. Do you really think the neighbor will help you? Do you
Remember
think,
all the perceptions we saw? So you have to also remember that your neighbor might also carry those same perceptions, even though they may not be an employer.
the employer could, the neighbor could just, bring it back to the employer and then get you in even more trouble, actually.
But again, no wrong answers. If you want to ask your neighbor for help, you can. What is the majority thinking at this moment?
There's like a mix of answers. Like there's like keeping your head low. Yeah. Like Akil said, realistically, I would keep my head low. And that's an interesting answer from Sarah Zarina. Okay, what if I keep my head low but suddenly ask my neighbor for help? Unfortunately, it's just one option for now.
I'm sorry, guys. I would love to click both answers, but I can't.
Yeah, if I were there, I would just like to have both options, like
Okay,
a backup.
you guys want to ask your neighbors, or you want to keep your head low?
No.
Seems like it's keep your head
Yeah.
low.
So from then on, you do the work, pray for time to pass quickly so you can go home to your family again. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you are curious what happens if you ask your neighbor for help. So I'm going to pick it for you. So if this particular neighbor will direct you to an NGO that champions migrant worker rights, but you soon realize that the process to access to justice is a really, really long, tedious one. So because of that, you still continue to do the work and pray for time to pass by quickly so you can go home to your family again. So what was that like for all of you? What was it like to be Lisa and make those really, really difficult decisions?
She discovers Project Liberate. Good ending.
I mean, yes, we're really happy if that was the ending, but that's not the reality for a lot of them. Very few migrant workers actually end up with the kind of legal help that they are entitled to, that they deserve, that they can find the time and money for. But more often than not, it's actually quite an unfortunate ending. So a lot of them just stay on, do the work, and go back. But I think what you would realize is that sometimes the risks are not as obvious as you think. Sometimes the risk comes in very different forms. And you may think that you are at a position to make so many decisions because, like, for example, like feeling uncomfortable with the massage, right? You may think that, yeah, actually nothing wrong if I tell the neighbor. And at the same time, you're like, nothing wrong if I don't say anything also. But you realize you're kind of like cornered because you're like, if I tell the neighbor, what if the neighbor is also nasty? What if the neighbor complains to my employer or it complains to the female employer? What do I do then? And then you realize you're kind of just pushed to the corner and you really only have one decision to make and you don't actually have the kind of freedom that you thought you probably had at the beginning. You're lucky? Anybody wants to share how?
Yeah, I just want to raise Justin's point. At every point, it feels like you don't have the choice to look for help or to question how unfair the situation is. Yeah, because the options that most domestic workers, most migrant workers, they don't have a good option. It's just worse or like shit. It's like those two options.
It's always the lesser of two evils. They don't really have the opportunity to have this really nice, helpful, like two great options, and then like I'll just pick one away. It's always the lesser of two evils because, like I said, the inherent risk of all their decisions are usually really costly. Whether it's being deported, going to jail, dealing with cops, it's really, really difficult repercussions that sometimes, I'm sure even if we were in their shoes, it's one of those things we'd be like, do I really want to deal with the cops? My passport also not with me. My boss took my passport. Now the cops, if I tell them anything, they're going to ask me where's my passport. And then I'm going to say I don't have it with my boss and they put me in lockup. So your repercussions, the consequences that come with all your decisions are usually a very heavy price to pay. Which is why Lisa only had that many options. If you're in Lisa's position, you probably feel, at least I have two options as opposed to just one. But if you really look at it, you're always going to be cornered by the end of the day and you only have one decision. Okay, can I go to the video? Yes, no, yes, no.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can watch the video.
Okay. Ding.
Come on. Lisa, this is your new home. Okay. Hey, I thought your work trip was next week.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to tell you. They moved it forward.
So when are you going to be back?
Next weekend?
Lisa, this is Sir.
Hello, Sir.
Hello, Lisa. Hey, sorry, I really have to rush.
Right, bye, sweetie.
Bye. I see you when I'm back.
This is June.
Hello, June. Auntie Lisa.
Just Lisa will do. Okay. Go do your homework.
Ma'am, where can I rest?
Rest. You just arrived and you're already thinking about rest.
No, ma'am. Sorry. What I mean is, where is my room where I can sleep at night and then put all my things.
Okay, room. You want a room? Okay.
Ma'am, I put my luggage in there.
It's your room. You can clean it up how you like, and I have a brand new mattress that you can use.
Okay, ma'am.
Oh, and I'll also need to keep your passport and your work permit.
But ma'am, I will need my working permit when I go out on my day off.
When we were at the agency, I thought it was made very clear to you that you have no days off, and you agreed to it.
But ma'am, I thought it's only at the start, until I am able to pay my debt to you.
We need you here. And you agreed to it. And you know what? Besides, if you go out, you're just going to waste money. Or you might fall into bad company, and that will just mean trouble for everybody. Come on.
Okay, ma'am.
You know, I'm just doing what every other employer is doing. And you are not special.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay? Come on, June, go sit down.
Ma'am, where do I eat?
You can eat after we're both done. Lisa? Lisa?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm feeling a little bit hungry. Can you go and make me some food?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, ma'am. Sorry,
My work.
ma'am. I can fix it. I can see why you're so clumsy. I'm sorry.
Morning. Mrs. Chen. Oh, yes. June's teacher. Hi. She did what?
Migrant, June got into trouble earlier today. She pushed our canteen auntie down and caused her to fall. Fortunately, the auntie only got a small bruise. Where did you learn to behave like that?
What happened?
It was a small accident. The auntie spilled some food on June, but she reacted by yelling, pushing her, and calling her clumsy. Migrant, we are concerned and worried. June was a respectful and polite student. We need to know what caused her change and what can we do to help her.
I think I know what I should do. Oh, wait. June, from now we're going to keep our own shoes. Okay? Good stuff. Lisa,
Yes, ma'am.
here's your passport and your work permit. Feel free to enjoy your day off.
Thank you, ma'am.
Lisa,
Yes, ma'am.
would you like to join us for dinner?
Lisa is eating with us.
It's Auntie Lisa. Call Auntie Lisa.
Auntie Lisa. Thank you, ma'am.
Lisa, you made this very well. Here.
Thank you, ma'am. You want this?
You know what? You sure it's not too big for you? Can you finish it? Can you finish it?
Okay, hello, welcome back. Is everybody there?
Hey, here, we can hear you.
Okay. So how was that? That was quite a trip, wasn't it? What about the video moved you? Did you feel something? Were you upset? Were you happy? What? Tell me. I want to know.
Like in the chat box, Irfan Naveen said that character development on point, though, but unfortunately it rarely happens in the real world. Yeah. Same
Yeah.
goes. Yeah.
Same goes to?
Sarah Zarina said that unfortunately it's not always like that, like optimistic scenario, but of how a person would change.
Okay, yeah, that's true. This is very ideal. It's what we always hope to achieve eventually. But of course, I think the real ideal situation is that we don't mistreat them in any way from the beginning itself, lah. But if you notice, a lot of the things that we saw in the beginning, things like perception and the reality check in terms of their decision-making process, you would see that reflect in this video very clearly. Like she comes in and she's like, oh, I only supposed to like give you my passport for the beginning stages, because after that I'm entitled to my leave and all these things. And she's like, but every employer does this, so I'm doing exactly the same. But also, I don't want you to get in trouble and cause me problems. I've also had sessions where the students or the participants will say the husband is useless because he left for work just like that. But there are a lot of factors that come into it. Of course, I think if you want to look at it from the employer's point of view, is the employer has paid a lot of money to get the domestic worker with a family and has very high expectations. And because other employers have already normalized a lot of things like no fixed working hours, restricting their movement. So she also feels that she's entitled to do the same. But because the daughter here is the deal breaker and she kind of emulates the mom's actions, so that the mom has like a whole light bulb moment and decides to change. So of course we all hope that Lisa's outcome is what other domestic workers also face. But yes, it's never really the scenario lah. More often than not, they get deported, they get stuck in lockup, they get stranded in Malaysia. Those are the more real harsh realities that they face. So there, as you can see, these are very common issues a lot of domestic workers in Malaysia face. They're very easily exploited because of how vulnerable they are in the situation. Again, because of the inherent risk of saying no. They don't have access to their rights or any kind of remedies. But a little caveat to that is that a lot of ministries, like the embassies here, like the one that's very, very good at it and has been like an example to other embassies is the Philippines embassy. So there's a few NGOs. One that I've worked with is like AMPO, and what they do is they run post-arrival training. So once the domestic worker gets into Malaysia, they run like a 3-day training and teaches them their basic rights, hotline numbers, when they should say no, the kind of terms in their contract. They're very small but very impactful things. Also, we go back to the fact that a lot of employers generally have negative perceptions and discriminatory attitude towards migrant workers, and that's why migrant workers don't feel empowered to seek help. So this one you can see in the whole asking the neighbor. If you have a good neighbor, yeah, they will help you, but more often than not, your neighbor will just look at you and be like, no, I'm going to complain to your boss about it. So you also feel like you're not empowered enough to actually go and seek help. Okay? Yes, okay. I move on. Is that okay?
Yeah. Just reading the comments in the chat box. It's like so happening here.
Well, I can't see.
I'll just read it for you. Ashmita said that she's happy for Lisa in the clip, and then Ziad said he felt guilty.
Okay.
And then further elaborated that seems like my family has not been treating our domestic workers not as optimally as we should.
Okay.
Yeah, and Akil shared that also it really highlights how women with class privilege are also very complicit in the oppression of female migrant workers.
Yes.
Yeah, very, very good point. So these are the thoughts that all of participants felt. So Justine said that she had to go, have an MPU right now. So thank you so much. I think Justine left, but thank you.
Yeah, so you guys are absolutely right. I think being able to be open to new information and understanding the consequences of like being able to be receptive of the information, you will realize a lot of things. And I think it's important that we're always open, because these are vulnerable groups of people. And sometimes while we think objectively that these are the possible frustrations and stress that they may feel, or these are the possible problems they are constantly facing, sometimes you'll be surprised at the amount of other kinds of problems that you never foresaw. And so it's really important to listen, really to just let them speak, and then you just listen and see like where they're coming from, why they're facing what they face. And then us on this level, what we can do is always kind of like structure it in a way that we can, share it to other people and let them see and understand why vulnerable groups like this are facing problems A, B, C, and D. Okay? Yes, my favorite game also. So we're going to do Minute Mania, which is basically a true and false questionnaire. Like, for example, do you think I'm pretty? The answer is true, that kind of thing. So I'm just going to go on with the questions, and then you guys can either unmute and shout, or I guess you can answer it in the chat box. And I think Shaza, Alia will help me hear the answers.
Yeah, can. You guys can comment with TF or I don't know.
Yes. Because there is no harm in not knowing the answers. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
Okay, first one. Only women are allowed to be domestic workers in Malaysia.
What do you guys think?
Think.
False. All right. Joshua said false. Anyone else wants to weigh in? False. Wow.
Seems like all of these are false.
Yeah. F in the chat. F then again.
True.
Yeah.
True. only women are allowed to be domestic workers. Remember in the beginning, I was saying how our system is already pretty gender biased and it's built with very male perspectives. So domestic work is seen as women's work, work that is generally of lesser value. So that perception is very, very strong, which is why domestic work is only allowed. One of the criteria is, okay, apart from being like 18 years old, 45 years old, another criteria is the fact that you have to be a woman. So, dang, dang, dang. I'm sorry, all your answers were wrong, which is fine. Now you learn something new. The next one. There are more men migrant workers than women migrant workers in Malaysia.
Yeah. When you look around, do you guys see more men migrant workers than women migrant workers? What do you guys think? True. True. Yeah. I think true. False. There's a mix of answers here. But most of you guys said true. Neither.
Okay. It is true.
Right.
There are more men migrant workers than women migrant workers. It's because of the limited areas of work that they're allowed to do. Also because I think in Malaysia especially, there's a lot more demand on the construction side, which is a male-dominated field. So you have a lot more male migrant workers there. But generally, in terms of stats or like numbers, then definitely there are more men migrant workers than women migrant workers in Malaysia. Women migrant workers aren't allowed to get married in Malaysia.
True. True. A lot of true. True. False and true. Alan spoiled this one for us. Did you tell them before?
No, I mentioned it earlier just now.
Yeah.
Like in the first part of it. So if they remember, if they were listening, they would know the answer to this.
So yeah, it's true. Women migrant workers aren't allowed to get married in Malaysia. This is because they come on a work visa, so all they're supposed to do is, well, work. So like I mentioned earlier, policies like this or rules like this, what they do is they pretty much undercut your right, the right to have a family, to meet someone, to build relationships. All these things are, our rights, including women migrant workers. But the policy is such that they're not allowed to come here and get married on their work visa. If at all they want to get married, they have to go back to either their countries or other countries that allow this, get married, and then come back to Malaysia. Globally, okay, women migrant workers send home less money.
True. True. Why do you guys think it's true and why do you guys think it's false? Anyone wants to unmute themselves? Most of you guys say true. Because they're paid less. True because they're paid less.
Okay.
Akil, do you want to unmute yourself?
It is false. You guys are right that women migrant workers do earn a lot lesser than men, but they actually are known, or there's numbers to show that do send more money despite earning lesser. I think somebody wants to share something, right?
Yeah, Akil.
I thought it was because of the wage gap, but I have been proven wrong.
I think if we go back to Lisa's example, right? I think you would. I don't know if you picked it up as well, but if you see it, right? When Lisa decided that she wants to come to Malaysia to work, it was said that she's an irresponsible mother because she's leaving her kids to come here and work. Generally, if this was the other way around, if Lisa's husband had decided to come to Malaysia, more often than not, the perception would have been, oh, that's really heroic of you. It's really responsible of you to be going to Malaysia and leaving your wife and kids here so you can earn for them. So what really happens is a lot of the women migrant workers that come here, they come with that extra responsibility of having to take care of both husband and kids, or like having a lot of kids and then they have to take care of them. So they do end up spending a lot more money than spending it on themselves here. Men migrant workers, not that they don't do the same, there are a lot of them that do the same, but they tend to have they do save quite a bit for themselves here as well to survive, whether on food, some days, even, like entertainment, like watching a movie, going out with friends to have a meal. They do also prioritize those aspects of their lives as opposed to women migrant workers who come here with that sense of like, I am the wife, I'm the mother, I have to do these many things before I can even think about myself. And yes, of course, there's of course the gender wage gap. They do earn a lot lesser, but they still thrive really, really hard to send a lot more money within that small amount of wage. Okay? If I'm talking too fast, please let me know. I'm just very excited. Migrant workers are worsening Malaysia's unemployment rate. This one is an everyday conversation.
False. 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 Unemployment rate is high because of the government. That's so true.
Okay, so yes, the answer is false. Migrant workers are definitely not the reason of Malaysia's unemployment rate. But actually, if you do have the time to do a bit more reading on MOHR's policies, you will see, like Singapore as well, a lot of other countries, for you to hire foreign talent of any kind, you have to justify why first. You're always supposed to take the locals first, employ them first, then consider having foreign talent of any kind. So Malaysia's unemployment rate is purely because of Malaysia's policies, Malaysia's perceptions of how work is today, and Malaysia's system in itself. Okay.
Should probably point out also that Joshua said on the chat that he said false because he's read recently that a lot of the work is so 3D that no one wants to do it.
Correct. That is actually really, really, really true, and it's like a double-edged sword in the sense that a lot of the youth in Malaysia have managed to reach a certain level of education. So a lot of them come with degrees and they want to practice in those fields, but there's so limited opportunity. So when policies are made with MOHR, they're just like, they disregard all of that. They're just like, oh, so what? If you're young, you have a degree, just do the work that's available. So when it becomes 3D jobs, a lot of young people who have worked so hard to get their degrees, to get their experiences, are forced into these kind of 3D jobs. They also feel cheated lah. You know, it's not a very fair playing field for them. And then what happens is they'll go and ask for slightly better wages because they're like, look, I'm educated, I've got a degree, I've got this, I've got that. So you got to give me a little bit more, although it's a 3D job. Then you have employers who are like, oh, but foreign labor is cheaper. I only have to pay them like 1/3 of what I'm going to pay you. So it's really just a system. Malaysian employers are allowed to take a domestic worker's passport for safekeeping. What say you?
False. False. See, false. False. Yeah, all of you guys said false in the chat box. So you guys are right.
Like many rights that you have, like right to vote and all that, freedom to movement is also your right, which is what is kind of entailed with your passport. So your passport is your identification to move across freely, and no one is allowed to take it, basically. So to give you a nice example of how some industries have kind of overcome this, for example, like in plantation sectors, you can see this with like palm oil estates or rubber estates. What they've done is they have like a mutual locker system. So the employer and the migrant worker has a key to their designated locker, and they keep like either the original copies of the passport and contracts, or they keep like the photostat copies of these things. So if the migrant worker wants to go out on his rest day, he can still access the locker, and if the employer for any specific reason needs it, they also have access to it. So they've kind of worked around it where both parties are comfortable with the decision, but ultimately no one is supposed to have your passport but you. So this also applies to you guys. You know, if you're going anywhere and someone says they need to keep it for safekeeping, you give them the photostat copy, you keep the original until the very end. Okay? Another question, right? Yeah. Domestic workers should get one stipulated day off per week.
What do you guys think? True. And more tea? True.
Okay. Yes. they should get one stipulated day off per week. But I want to emphasize on the fact that it says should and it's not like must, because our local laws and regulations do not offer this. It doesn't say anywhere that domestic workers must get one day off, that the employer has no choice but to do it. So when we say should get one stipulated day off, it comes from the International Labour Organization's convention. So one of their recommendations, at least, is that they should get one day off lah. The problem with this kind of very international standards and rules, it really depends on the national country or the host country whether they want to implement it. So over here, we still haven't really reached that point where domestic workers must get a day off. So it's still so far as should get one day off. Migrant workers' legal status to remain in Malaysia is directly tied to their employer. Meaning if they're supposed to be here for 5 years, it's only tied to one boss. And if they want a new boss, they will probably have to get deported or go back and then find the new boss and then come back again.
True. True. True.
Okay, it is true. It's a very rigid system. So they are all over here. They don't. I think if you know, like the EU, especially the European Union, so you have this like job seeker status, like job seeker rights or allowances and stuff, where you can move within the European Union to look for jobs with different bosses. With migrant workers over here, that's not the same case. You're tied to one person. So if you're tied to that one person for 10 years, you're only tied to that person. If at all that boss says, I don't want you anymore, they deport you or they cut off your visas, you have to go back to your to your host country, to where you're from. There are a lot of talks with NGOs that they want a more flexible system to give migrant workers the opportunity to decide who their boss is. So when they come in, they work with boss A and they feel like they're abusive, they can at least resign and find boss B without having to go back to their national countries. But that's still like a very negotiating stage at this point, but it's something that you guys can, of course, think about. So yeah, that was actually Minute Mania. And there is a post-test, which hopefully I have taught you enough that you can answer these questions a bit more. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I think the link will be in the chat box.
Yep, I'll send the link in the chat box. Just give me a minute. But in the meantime, what do you guys think of the Minute Mania?
Yeah.
Like which statement made you like surprised? Which fact? The post test is in the chat box, so do fill in. The last one. The women, yeah, only women can be domestic workers in Malaysia. Yep. Yeah, that also surprised me too. Like women migrant workers send more money than men. Because at that time I didn't, when I first started like training for this program, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that, and I went through the same workshop that you guys are doing right now, and I was like, oh, it surprised me. It kind of felt like I was like dumb lah because I didn't know, but now I know.
You know, when I was doing migrant worker rights work, I think the biggest learning curve for me was understanding why it was so important to use domestic workers and not maids and helpers. Because like, it's not that I didn't respect their work, like I didn't realize how much impact the word maid had and helper, to the point that calling them or referring to them as helper kind of just totally diminishes their work and treats them as someone who's not entitled to wages. And I was just so mind blown. I remember talking to the representative from AMPO at that time, and I was just like, oh my god, how did I not see this? Like, why did I study law if I did not understand this in the first place? Let me know when I can continue the last bit.
All right. Let me see the responses. I know that you guys are really fast. Right.
Also, I hope you all agreed when I said, the example for Minute Mania is me being pretty, which is true. All of you need the validation on a Saturday.
We have 3 responses. You guys can keep them coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I sambung lah the last part.
Yeah, I think you can summon the last part.
Yeah, you guys can continue filling it in. I'm just gonna wrap it up. We're closing the deadline. We're close to the deadline. There's another quick video, so you can fill in your post-test as you want it. Okay, so how was that? Another trip, I'm sure.
What do you guys think of the ending? Yeah, it can happen anywhere, even in your own home. You don't even realize it. Yeah. He was proud of himself for saving a domestic worker, but in his own home. ... Yeah. Like your own mother, right? How can you like confront if you ever see your mother like abuse your domestic worker?
Okay, so I'd like to tie this back to the beginning again. So you know how we played that little game with me asking you to bring stuff around you? So situations like this, especially with vulnerable group people who are oppressed or marginalized in any way, what it really takes for a lot of us to do is to take cognizance of the environment, to look around, see what's going on, pay a little bit extra attention. So sometimes when we do that game, a lot of times people would be like, hey, I've forgotten that this thing exists. I've forgotten this thing has been in my room for the longest time. It really just is about looking around and paying attention to a little bit of details, a little bit of extra time taken. So just like this, he had paid attention to how his mom is treating to his domestic worker. He would have realized that that's the same thing that's happening on the other end of the apartment. So one of the main things that all of us can do is to always pay attention. I know it's not easy. We're all busy, but things like this happen all around us. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of extra step, just to go a little bit extra and be like, how can I notice this before? Something's happening. Something's not right. I want to address this. Okay. So what can we do? You can stay informed. Which one of the things is you guys joining stuff like this. You keep track of the news and other resources. I think like just a few minutes ago, I read the news and Suhakam, which is the Malaysian the National Human Rights Body, has requested PDRM to start an inquest into suicidal rates on Nepali workers. So there are a lot of things that's always happening, a lot of things that's going on. So it's with tech at our disposal, at our fingertips, it is our responsibility to stay as informed as we can. Language check, use inclusive language, domestic workers, not maids, use documented workers, undocumented workers, not illegal people. Of course, always be ready to educate your loved ones. It's not easy. Sometimes it can be really, really intimidating, but baby steps, okay, because change begins at home. And oftentimes we know someone who acts or thinks this way. So be ready to talk with them about these things. It's the same as, how do I say, like, when we saw the video with Lisa and then the employers like, well, all employers do this. So you want that change to happen. So the conversation has to take place. So it's good if you guys can do it. And you guys gave really good answers. So I have no doubt that you guys will be really good at this part. And these are helplines that you can call if you see anything suspicious happening. There's of course the Department of Labor, and you also have the National Anti-Trafficking Hotline. The only thing is that they're kind of limited in terms of hours, but if at all at any other hour you feel the need to contact someone, you can definitely drop Project Liberate a message or a note, and we will also try our best to help. Then you have the Legal Aid Center. You also have Tenaga Nita. Tenaga Nita, they're 24 hours because they run shelters for traffic victims or migrant workers who are abused. So they actually kind of do this like 24/7. So you can contact them as well. And yeah, any questions you guys have?
Yeah, any final thoughts you want to say? Any you want to reflect, comment on? Yeah, just to note, I've plugged in the NGOs and their hotlines. So yeah, do note if you are seeing domestic workers or migrant workers getting abused, or you feel like something suspicious is going on, you can just contact these numbers. They're in the chat box. So yeah.
Oh, okay, nice. Well, before I release you, I've already taken 2 minutes, extra minutes. I'm very sorry, but a small little thing that I would like to ask you to kind of do, if you can, is to see if you can get 3 people within your circle to stop using the word maid or helper and start using the word domestic workers. I say this because I've done this for myself and my family and friends, which took me like years to get them to change the language. But now I have a few of them who actually actively and like consciously say domestic worker. So, if you can do like 3 people maybe in the next couple of months, I think that'd be really cool. And if you want to share that with us, you can drop us an email and be like, hey, guess what? Because I did that. And yeah, and it'd be it'd be really nice to hear from you again. And that is the end. So I shall stop doing this screen sharing.
All right, thank you, Morgana.
Thank you, guys. I hope you had fun. I hope I managed to break this down in a way that you guys could absorb on a Saturday afternoon when it's raining.
I know it's been, quite a bit of an afternoon. Usually the Women Labour Migration workshop is quite a lot of content, right? Like, going through the games and going through all the facts. But I think it's really great that you're doing this workshop almost immediately, because this workshop is around like creating effective campaigns and really kind of putting whatever you've learned just now into practice. So